Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Millennial, and in today's video we're gonna talk about how you can actually start preparing for Christmas, particularly if you haven't done it already, because by the time this video is out it is going to be less than a month before Christmas Day. So in this video I thought I would share some of my key tips in terms of actually saving and preparing for Christmas so that you don't end up overspending. So the first tip I want to give you when it comes to actually preparing and saving for Christmas is to not actually get into debt. Now if you're subscribed to my channel then you probably know that this isn't particularly a surprise, and you knew I was probably going to mention this as well. But guys, if you cannot afford certain things, please do not go and use debt to go and finance it, particularly because you were actually using debt to go and buy liabilities that you really don't need and aren't serving you at all. Now specifically when I'm talking about debt, I'm talking about things like credit card debt. So even though you may be using a credit card to actually shop for Christmas, if you know that you have no intentions of actually paying off the full balance by the end of the month, then personally I would not be using it. The same thing with personal loans that you're trying to use just to pay for Christmas, or these buy now pay later schemes where you know that they're giving interest free for a certain amount of time, and so you decide that you're actually just going to take advantage of it, but then you continue to buy even more stuff without realizing that there may come to a point where you actually have to pay interest on that and they end up skinning you alive. So please guys, really be careful when it comes to actually using debt to go and finance things, particularly for Christmas, and really question yourself whether you can actually afford it, because if you're using debt to finance things like Christmas presents, then most likely you cannot afford it. So guys, if you don't have the money, then you don't have it, but I would honestly beg you to avoid using debt, because if you're not careful it might even take you months or even years to pay off that credit card company, just purely based on the fact that you actually use so much debt to go and finance all of these Christmas presents. Now I know that we're in a period where things are getting really expensive, particularly due to inflation, but also at the same time people are getting really excited because we had basically been in lockdown last year. But really check with yourself and actually ask yourself, are these things that you really need to be buying at this point in time, particularly if you cannot afford it? Because again, if you really can't afford it, then you really want to be asking your future self, are you willing to put yourself in debt by just buying these Christmas presents, knowing that it could take a very long time for you to pay it back, and the amount of interest that you could potentially be paying back could be astronomical. So again, if there's one thing you take away from this video, please do avoid debt. And if you're liking this video so far, then feel free to give me a thumbs up, as it really does help to support the channel, plus it's free. So the next tip I want to give you when it comes to actually preparing and saving for Christmas is to actually start planning how much you can realistically spend by looking at your budget. Now the reason why I say this is because there is no point in you thinking that you have £250 or dollars to spend on Christmas presents, but then after your budget actually it basically tells you you only have £100 or dollars, because essentially if you don't actually look at your budget you probably will end up overspending. Now of course I'm not saying to not buy things like Christmas presents at all, but what I'm essentially saying is to just really plan for it in advance and make sure you understand your finances so that you understand realistically how much you can start putting towards things like Christmas. And the other thing I would mention is don't just think about just Christmas presents, for example. Really think about other expenses that you may need to pay for, particularly during the Christmas time. So for example, yes, you might be focusing on Christmas presents, but you might have work events that you're going to be going to which you're going to need to pay for, or you may be going out with more friends during the Christmas time, so you may be going out to eat a lot more. Are you going to be doing most of the Christmas shopping this year when it comes to actually feeding your family, for example? So really think about the different areas, because what I found is that a lot of people, they will probably just budget for the Christmas presents and that's it, without realizing that there are going to be other expenses that they won't usually pay for just because of the Christmas period. So you really want to take that into consideration and see if you can start planning for that now, so that you're a lot more realistic and you don't end up overspending by the end of December. Now if up to this point you haven't actually budgeted before, or you haven't started a budget or anything like that, then you can definitely check out some of the videos on my channel. I have a whole load of different budgeting videos, plus I also have my budget template, and it's never too late to start budgeting. So with my budget templates, they also include a net worth statement, a sinking funds calculator, and you have the choice between a monthly budget template or a weekly budget template. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. I will of course leave that in the description below for you. But I would definitely say that when it comes to December, it's probably one of the most expensive months of the year, because there are all of these celebrations that are going on. So the more you can basically plan in advance, the better. So the next tip I want to give you when it comes to preparing and saving for Christmas is to actually start being creative. Now what I mean by that is when it comes to things like Christmas presents, really ask yourself, do you have to give every single person in your family or every single friend a gift? Because I'm not gonna lie, the more friends and family you want to gift, the more expensive it's going to become. So rather than actually buying something, if you have the talent, could you potentially make something instead? So for example, when it comes to my sister, she's very good at art. So one Christmas she actually ended up making us different portraits, and that was her Christmas present, and so it meant that it really didn't cost her very much. Likewise, can you limit how many gifts you're actually giving? In our family, we're doing gift giving, so we are only buying presents for one person, and we're making sure that the price is also affordable, and so it means that we don't end up having to spend hundreds on just gifts. So for us, buying so many gifts isn't really a priority. The other way you could be creative is actually think about the current things in your house. Could you actually end up selling that stuff so that you can use some of the cash to buy Christmas presents, or even fund some of the events that you're going to be going to during the month of December? I mean, I haven't worn any of these in a while. I guess I could sell them. And this could be useful, especially if you find that after your budget, you actually don't really have a lot of money to spend during the Christmas period. If you're actually able to sell some stuff and make some cash, you could potentially then use that money to actually pay for gifts or pay for different events that you might be going to. So the next tip I want to give when it comes to preparing and saving for Christmas is to create a sinking fund for Christmas now, but also for Christmas in the future as well. Now, when I'm talking about sinking funds, they are essentially expenses that you want to plan for in advance, and you probably will start saving for them over time. So for example, in my case, usually I will actually start saving up for Christmas from basically the start of the year. And so that basically gives me a whole year for me to actually just be putting small amounts of money aside so that I can essentially pay for Christmas by the end of the year. And what that means is that I have the peace and mind of knowing that I'm literally just putting a small amount every single month away, but by the time it gets to November and December time, I now have quite a big pot of money so that I can essentially use that for the month of December. Now, obviously by the time I'm recording this, it's not January, it's actually November, so you may only have maybe 1 or 2 paychecks before Christmas. But what I would say is actually just try and start putting money aside for that anyway, so that it doesn't get to a point where in December you basically overspend on everything. Now, if you're a total beginner when it comes to actually creating sinking funds, then don't worry, I do have a video where I talk about sinking funds in a lot more detail, so definitely check that out if you haven't already. I will of course link that up here for you and in the description below. But again, no matter how late you may have left it, ideally what you want to be doing is at least planning something in advance so that you can actually understand how much you're going to be allocating towards things like Christmas. So the next tip I want to give when it comes to preparing and saving for Christmas is to take advantage of some of the sales. However, the one thing I would say is you really do not want to be impulse spending. So you really don't want to just be seeing all these sales and just buying things because they are basically on sale. What you want to be doing is actually planning what you're going to be buying in the first place. Have a list, write it down, understand what you're actually going to be buying, and that's when you can then start to look for sales to see if you can get something at a discounted rate. And again, as I always say, really you should only be buying what you can truly afford. If you know that your budget has told you can only afford £100 or dollars on Christmas presents, then you really shouldn't be looking for presents that cost $250 upwards. The same thing goes for things like Boxing Day sales as well, because I know a lot of people will get really excited and they see all these stores giving these discounts like 40% off, 50% off. But again, you really want to start planning it in advance and knowing what you actually want to buy, because there's no point in buying something just because it's on sale if you know that you're not actually going to use it. Now, also really be aware that sometimes these things aren't actually on sale. What retailers could potentially do is actually maybe inflate the prices slightly just before sales. So even things like Black Friday sales, and then what you find is that they now then say 20% off, 30% off, and it looks like you're getting an amazing deal when in theory you might not be getting as much of a great deal as you thought. So definitely make sure you're being aware of that, and again, make sure you're actually buying things that number one you can afford, but then also number two that you know you've actually planned for. And so remember, when it comes to spending your money, I will never tell you not to spend your money, but what I'm saying is just really think about spending intentionally and actually planning your spending as well, because the worst thing that you want to be doing is spending all of your money come December, and some people even use debt to finance that, but then come January everyone's always broke, and when they're trying to actually work on their personal finances, they find that they have absolutely no money during that month. So if you do want to learn more about how you can actually manage your money so that you can become financially secure, then definitely check out my free guide where it really talks about how you can actually start controlling your finances. I will of course link that up here for you and in the description below. But again, when it comes to preparing for Christmas, I would say really try to avoid debt as much as possible, plan your spending, be creative, and sometimes take advantage of those sales. So if you did like this video, then please do give me a thumbs up if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments what other tips would you give to prepare for Christmas. I do post every Tuesday and Friday, so if you would like to know more, then of course you can subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys on Tuesday.